Collision Course is back. Schedule B on Revolution Radio every Saturday night, 6 to 8 p.m. You get outer space. You get honest answers, real researchers, truthful answers, and a place to engage with questions. Take part in the discussion. Revolution Radio on slips.com hosts Collision Course every Saturday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Time.
I'm Reverend Medium Tracy Lockwood, and I'd like to invite you to join me as I discuss life from a medium's perspective. I'll be talking about insights that I've gained through readings, with topics like your guides, angels, animal communication, past lives, our transition, and the afterlife. We'll take a deeper look at the metaphysical meanings of symbols and totems, and I'll give you some practical exercises to help you develop your own natural psychic ability. Join me on From a Medium's Perspective.
Do you or someone you know suffer from poor circulation, shortness of breath, or chest pains? Are you looking for a more natural solution to help overcome these problems? People tell us that after just a few months taking Extendivite, their doctors have noticed unexplainable improvements in their overall health. For more information, visit heartdrop.com or call 1-877-928-8822.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
And tell them Nighthawk sent you, because if you call this number and tell them Nighthawk sent you, you'll get $5 off your first order at extendivite.com. Thank you. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, it's time to stumble down the road with host Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff and co-host Jenny Vaught as they carry stones, dig holes, and wield their shovels along the way. On Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. This is not a seated event. As they talk, run, stumble, carry, dig, drag, laugh, fight, sing and pray, dance and kick and scream, and oftentimes fall. Hey, is that a stone or a buffalo check? Now, here are your hosts for the next 2 hours on carrying stones and digging holes. But I won't be there.
The hell I won't.
All right, sorry about that. I was muted. Mona saved the day. No. Sorry about that. So I thought I was like blabbing on for the last, 5 minutes. Anyway, so this is Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, the host of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes. And I was so happy about my intro too. Would be, when I'm like not being listened to on purpose. Anyway, so Revolution Radio, Carrying Stones and Digging Holes, radio show. This is the last, Saturday of the month. I have been doing a huge amount of spiritual work, like I'd say October, November, and December. And last night there was kind of a amazing breakthrough moving forward. So I know that a lot of people out there are probably doing a lot of spiritual work. And, sometimes remember when you first wake up, things can be a little bit terrifying, new information that's coming in that's not sometimes like verifiable. Hey, Bill, we heard you burp.
Oh, just swarming up.
All right. Anyway, and so just to hang on, hang on while you make it through kind of the rough and bumpy part. And remember, feelings and how you feel are usually pretty accurate. So it's probably a really good thing to allow yourself to feel kind of how you feel as you go through different processes. Sometimes, when you're going through big emotional stuff, just from a shamanism perspective, and I do online sessions of healing work and healthcare, so people can contact me on the website. But, you can go through lots of different kinds of emotional stuff. For example, in November, I spent a lot of time going through, pieces of my past where I felt like I hadn't really stepped up to the plate and done the right thing for myself. And so, one day I'd feel shame, one day I'd be mad at myself, and it could go minute to minute. But the best thing to do is just not to medicate on any level and, just kind of sit with how you feel. And sometimes, the anxiety can be so extreme that you feel like you just want to jump out of the car and run down the road screaming and, maybe have feelings of violence. And these are emotions that you need to get out, because if you continue to stuff them, there's going to be an explosion. You're going to explode. And sometimes when you explode, you may not be able to control it. So you want to stay in control by releasing the pressure valve. As those emotions and feelings come up, you just sit with them, deal with them, and get rid of them. Sometimes early on, it's super great to drive up to a mountaintop and just scream. Just to hear your own voice. And I've done that in the past. I've gone up to the top of the mountain and screamed and screamed and screamed until I had no voice left. Just, as a way to help myself to kind of release and, be able to hear my own voice and allow some of the, the unwanted, energies and feelings, to be released. And that way I'm not doing it in a negative way, and I'm not doing it in violence, and I'm not, projecting my stuff onto other people. Just kind of releasing that pressure valve, jumping up and down, screaming my head off, and hanging in there, putting my arms around myself and holding myself and, getting through it. And that is sometimes the best way to kind of get through a lot of the emotional stuff. And I know that a lot of people out there are, going through some pretty intense internalized emotional stuff. So don't hold it all in, but don't act inappropriately, and hang on to yourself, hug yourself, and ride the wave. Strap yourself in and ride the wave. Okay, so Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show on our Revolution Radio, freedomslits.com. We have a lot of stuff on the funding page. We are listener supported. I do advertise my holistic and alternative healthcare business online on Revolution Radio on our main page. We have advertising. You can buy heirloom seeds. It's always good to stock up on seeds. And if you just want to donate, you can do that as well. So let's see, what else? Also, if you need to get a hold of me for any reason, or you want to check out information about my show, you can go to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, click on the schedule, click on Schedule A, and then scroll down to the 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You'll see a bee with pollen on its legs flying towards a flower. That would be me. Click on that, and then you can get a bio information and contact information in case you want to contact me. All right. So today we have a return guest and a really good friend of mine who helped me through a lot and has taught me huge amounts about law and the legal system and who, we were made to be, but who we really are. And so I asked him to come back on, and he said yes. So we're not going to give his last name. We're only using Billy Dale. And then I'm just going to call him Bill. And we're going to have a 2-hour conversation about stuff we didn't get to have in the conversation the last time. And I believe Bill, I don't remember the exact Saturday, but Bill was on in, I think, around September on my show. So if you want to archive that, you can maybe find him somewhere in there again. So today, yesterday, we were talking about, maybe kind of topics that we would, want to talk about on this show today. So I'm going to go ahead and let Bill kind of start on his end with whatever he was thinking about, or, he's been making notes about. Hey, Bill, are you there?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Bill hates to talk.
I hate to talk a lot. So
yeah, he hates to talk, and so he's an introvert, mind guy. So, but we're going to go ahead and let him start opening about some of the stuff he sees in the world and topics that he thinks may be important to our listeners about. Different types of law we're probably going to discuss: common law or color of law or admiralty law. There's copyright law, civil law, criminal law, all kinds of different laws. So we're going to be using a lot of lingo that maybe some of you get, maybe some of you don't get, but hang in there. Okay, Bill, go ahead. What's on your mind? What's the first thing that's on your mind?
Hey, I saw in the internet today that the POTUS signed an executive order to stop counterfeiting U.S. money. Did you see that?
No. When does the order go into effect?
The minute he signed it. He's already done that, but basically that takes the Federal Reserve down because their whole system is a counterfeit. They have no authority to print money for this nation. So in order to stop other private businesses from coming in and doing the same thing the Federal Reserve has been doing for 100 years, and that's screwing the people, is that he's put a stop to that. And I think that pretty well backs up the fact that we're going to have new money coming out here pretty soon. Because if we can't go ahead and use this counterfeit money anymore, we're going to have to get real money. Don't you agree on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm glad to see that there's an executive order. When did he sign it? Did he sign it over the weekend while he's out of town?
Well, I'm not sure because it did come up on our site. So that sounds like a pretty good thing to me. That way we can go ahead and continue bringing in a new nation, a new world.
Well, another thing, too, think about this. Think about, there's a lot of information out there, a lot of people that have been talking about that they think, we're not in debt in the U.S. at what is it, $1.4 trillion, that we're actually $200 trillion in debt. And they know that there is a missing like $21 trillion that was cash printed. So it was actually printed in a criminal way. Yes. Because it wasn't approved by the American people to actually be printed under, the original Constitution. And we never really voted in this type of currency that we're using anyway. Congress decided to take away the rights of the people to have gold back or silver back currency. What was that in the 70s? Like 74, maybe?
I think that's it, 73, 74.
Yeah.
But, this thing about the debt where they say, well, the government has no debt because they put it on to the people to pay. Well, you can't do that either, especially since the government who's saying this crap is nothing more than an artificial fiction, the corporation, is that it can't make decisions for people. So any decision or anything they say that is owed by the United States, let it be known that the people owe nothing because they haven't had anything to owe. They've never had any money. They've never had really anything. They don't own their property. And so you can't go back on these people who have been brought down and bankrupt through a counterfeit system, because once this system comes out and it was counterfeit, that these people are going to have to pay their own debts. And for the most part, everything that was collected either went to the Queen or to the Catholic Church. So, people were ripped off left and right. So there's really, in reality, just by them printing or saying that we, the people, owe us debt is a lie. And as far as people owing anything to any banks, that's a lie. Because if they look into the banker's manual, it says that the banks can't loan credit, but yet all these people are running around with credit cards. Well, that's an impossibility. That's a violation of their own rule right there.
Right. Yeah. And people in America love credit. They're credit freaks. They're addicted to credit, which is going to be a problem in the future when people, it's going to go back to, before where you had to have collateral to buy things, right? You had to save up enough cash and pay for things kind of more outright. So, what just brought to mind was this whole counterfeiting executive order is that means that basically everything that's been printed by the United States Treasury could be considered counterfeit. Even the money that we supposedly have, I guess it would be the printed money, and it would make all the banks part of being brokers of counterfeit, wouldn't it? Every time they took a cash deposit, it would have made it, that law would make them brokers of counterfeiting, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
because
well, they
all
have
the
another
money's
problem.
being printed, it's all counterfeit now under the executive order that he put out.
Yeah, it's all counterfeit now, so that means they're going to have to bring out this money that we had looked at on the internet, which will be asset-backed money. Hopefully it would come out by Monday, but we don't know for sure. I'm sure they have a time set to where the people will be informed of all of this. And I'm sure they're going to have to come up with some way of just simply saying, well, the old debts just really aren't due anymore because they can't be paid off anyway. Who would want to pay off a counterfeit debt with real money? Who would want to go to a bankrupt Federal Reserve System that's privately owned and give them $21 trillion in gold-backed money when they never loaned anything to anyone or anybody at all? Now, that would be a farce. That would be a criminal action. And if they did that, we'd be broke again, or we'd fall right back into their hands. So, no, when this thing happens, that old money it's just going to have to go away. All those debts are going to have to go away, and they're going to have to do it. Otherwise, like I said, they're not really going to be starting a new system at all. We're just going to fall into another trash can. So.
Yes. Yeah. No. That's awesome. I mean, hit them in the old, nutsack. claim that the money is counterfeit. That's kind of when you call that a checkmate bill. Check.
Well, yeah, and it's a checkmate, and something strange just happened too here to my family. Let me just try to go back that far. About 10, 12 years ago, my son, whose name is also Bill, bought 2 pieces of property here and was having them all leased out and everything. And then the year 2008 came by, and that destroyed our business. And it started hurting other people, and he couldn't keep his homes rented, so he couldn't make payments. Now, what's strange about this thing is that he just quit making payments, and that was well over, holy crap, that was, 9, 10 years ago. And just out of the blue, a debt collection agency comes and sends him a notice that he owes $37,000 and that they're going to collect that debt for themselves. Now, what kind of a deal is that? I mean, how can you just quit making payments and for 8 to 10 years later, no one bothers you? The bank didn't come after you. They sent no notices. They just simply took the property over and resold it. And that was the end of it for all these years. And then now all of a sudden this guy comes out and he wants $37,000. So I was left with no choice. I don't like people who play games like that, no matter who they play against. So I sent this agency a contract, and I sent them a notice that we weren't going to accept their contract. So now if they want a contract, there's only one left open, and that was mine. And they graciously actually entered into the contract and came back and still demanding more money. So I wrote them a cover letter as well as sent them an invoice for $300,000. is that let me think here where I'm at on that. But we sent them an invoice. We sent them a copy of the actual contract that they've entered themselves into. And in the cover letter, I quite explained it just like this. And I told them that if the original loan company wanted $37,000, one of their own attorneys would have came and tried to collect that. They wouldn't farm it out. Or if they didn't have an attorney, they would come in and get another attorney by power of attorney to represent that particular original company. But that didn't happen. When you look at the stuff that they sent us, what they actually sent us was a new contract by a debt collector who's making a claim that he's doing a job for someone else when he hasn't. I politely explained to them that when that debt was not paid by my son, that debt was paid in full at that time, because all loans are insured, and when you don't pay your debt, the first thing they do is collect your insurance, and it's always the second holder that holds that anyway. The first corporation that comes out and buys or loans money has to get rid of it within 3 months, and they're always paid off in 3 months. And there's several places they can get paid off on that. One, insurance company. Number two, through your CUSIP system, because everyone in this country is wealthy if they could get hold of their CUSIP number. So based on all of this stuff that I'd sent them, I told them that they were not a representative of that company, that we had no contract with you whatsoever. And if you want to keep playing these games, you're entering into my contract. And they did. So now what we're doing is we're just waiting around to see what they want to do, because right now I got them in a hole. They have no jurisdiction over here in this particular town I live. They don't have any jurisdiction in this state because they're out of Texas. Now you got to realize these people just can't come running in here and start suing you when they're not even from the state. That's nothing more than more criminal actions. And I went on further to tell them I knew exactly how you got that loan and all these loan numbers. I said it was put up for sale for any idiot that wanted to come by and purchase this stuff. And they did. They came by and purchased that $37,000 contract for probably $3,500. And now what they're going to do is go out and try to see if this idiot will actually give them $37,000 for something they maybe paid only $3,000 for. It's just the way these companies work, is that if they give a loan out to the debt collector, your loan has already been paid. It's done. It's over. The only thing you have to do right now is try not to fall within the boundaries of their contract. And it even states on there how you're going to accept their contract or deny it, if you read everything properly. So we did, and now they're dancing to our tune.
Yeah, if I forgot to mention in the opening, if I forgot to mention to the listeners out there, that Bill is he's retired, but he was a common law court U.S. Marshal, and he also was a American common law court judge. So even though Bill doesn't talk to people very often or very much, he's kind of a porcupine to tangle with once you piss him off. Okay,
well, they have no power, Bridgette. It's all an assumption, and it's all a game, a poker game. And if you know how to play poker, then you can come back on it. But if you don't know how to play that game, I wouldn't advise it. I've been around a long time, so. Yeah,
no. And the other thing too is, one of the things that we always talk about is that you don't engage trouble. Especially like if you're kind of more, I'm going to use the word sovereign, even though it's kind of, sort of not a super positive word, but, if you are sovereign or want to be sovereign, there are just things that you don't engage in. You don't cause trouble. You don't speed. You don't get yourself pulled over all the time. You don't get yourself in trouble with anybody. And if trouble finds you, you deal with it, in a fast way. You're going to move fast on it. So, for example, if you get a debt letter or something like that, you're going to move on it and make sure you read it all kind of, gather an understanding. But the worst thing that you can do is allow your debt, contracts, people trying to get you in contract or accuse you of things to go on past the 30-day mark. You want to deal with things in a sovereign way, is confronting and facing these things. And if you don't have the information, at least working on gathering the information so that you, can move forward with solving, coming up with a remedy to solve that issue.
The best thing to do is get all the information you can, but don't go out and activate it. Keep it handy where you can use it at a later date. Your argument is never with a cop. Always be polite to him. Give him anything he wants. Driver's license. It doesn't matter. He's in trespass the minute he comes out on dry land. He's nothing more than a private security guard. He works nothing more for a bankrupt corporation. And yet these bankrupt corporations, well, if they're going to take you to court, they take you into their private court. Their courts are their enclaves. That's where they have safety. That's where they take your home after you don't pay taxes on it and sell it. They cannot sell it outside of the courthouse. Anything they do that is illegal has to be done within that court. If they step outside of the boundaries of that court and sell the property, we can arrest them on site. But that enclave is their little house, their little hideaway where they can do all their illegal things, because you got to realize when you step in there, every last person in there is being paid by the same company. What chance do you stand? Well, you're not an employee of that company, yet they're dragging you in there under their bylaws of their corporation to be plundered as an employee by their corporation. I mean, what the heck is that all about? How long are they going to get away with that? Even though this world's changing right now, even though Trump says we're going to go back to a gold standard and possibly bring in back United States number 3, which is the original republic, the last thing that's going to change in this world is our home economics, where these policemen who took off to work to protect the serve off of their cars are running out in the streets off their property, plundering people. That's where the last battle's going to be played out here in the United States once we go back into a republic, is getting the small towns and the cities out of their mental sickness and have them brought back into the proper venue of this nation.
I think that's going to be a big deal. I mean, that's the other thing too, is like once you start to get kind of a hold of like what they've done, those enclaves or those places that they hide, they're, considered under admiralty and maritime law. So that means that, these little places that they have are ships that are supposedly floating on water, but have a street address. And they have a street address. And like Bill was saying, when they leave those areas and they go out to do illegal work, they're no longer safe underneath their own law, their admiralty law. And in some cases, a lot of people don't know this. If you haven't really been in this movement for a while, is at one point in time, they created a line like on a stone, on the building, inside the building sometimes. So any government building, they would create this line, which would make the water line about, I don't know, probably tall as a human, like a 6-foot person. And they would say, okay, that's where the ocean water line is. So they would elevate their building. So the thing is, if you filed a FOIA act at them, they didn't really have to comply because all the files were underneath that water line. So they were all destroyed and they were submerged by water. So by law, they couldn't really, by their law, they couldn't really go into those basements and archives and get the water, because internationally, the line for admiralty law or maritime law, where the water line is and that their ships are floating on it, supposedly on a street address, all those files and records would be underwater. So they don't have to, by law, give you that information with FOIA, especially if it's in a basement, underground or underwater, vault that they're, keeping. So it's like these the whole thing is like so bizarre and so crazy that I think most people can't wrap their heads around it. And then this is the other part that sometimes I think people don't really get. So if you pretty much any court, any admiralty admiralty or color of law court, or Bill likes to call it, the ones that we know about that we have to deal with now, there's that gate. So, they show each courtroom is like a ship. And once you pass the gate of where the captain is, where the captain sits, where the captain's quarters are, which is the judge, once you pass that gate and you go to the testifying or whatever, stands, you have lost your rights as a sovereign person and now are under authority because, number one, you boarded the captain's ship, you're on the ship, under his concern, you're under violation of mutiny and his authority. And by law, captains were allowed to do whatever the heck that they wanted to people because, it could take 6 months for them to send the queen a letter. Okay, we've got these 5 people on board and this is what they're doing and they're acting crazy. And they're not going to wait 6 months to get a letter. They're going to give the authority to the captain to do whatever he wants to do. And in most cases, under ship law or military ship law or, even Columbus and all these people who sailed far away from their countries, they would throw the people overboard. So, you would walk the plank, right? Which is, to your, and sometimes walk the plank and then you were abandoned at sea. Okay. So this is also, where all of this kind of originates as well, as far as humans, is the abandonment at sea. And once they did that, they could get rid of you off ship or they could torture you or do whatever was necessary. So you board that ship and then you cross the gate into the captain, the captain's authority, which means he doesn't have to call anyone to ask them about the law. He doesn't have to call anybody. His law is based on presumption, right? And he is the presuming factor that's overseeing it. He can do whatever he wants because his ship sails under him. And when you walked into his court, that's his ship. He doesn't have to actually try to find law to actually, make sure that it's a lawful contract or agreement. He can just, because you were stupid enough to walk onto his ship, and not only his ship, but also wait to see him and be called to see him like a king, and bypass the gate, which shows that authority, and you go there, he can literally do whatever he wants to do to you by law of the sea, of law of being on their ship. And so this is another reason why you don't want to try to break their laws or actively end up, especially under the same captain of the ship over and over and over again. They lose patience after a while. And you're not going to be able to slap them with a whole bunch of sovereign stuff. They don't like it. Basically, it's kind of like blasphemy, against them as the god and the ruler of that court. And so if you try to be smart, you're going to end up saying something that's going to get you actually thrown in jail if you don't have enough information and kind of know what you're doing. So the last thing that you ever want to do is show up in any kind of admiralty law court, period, end of story. And you want to make sure that you don't do things to violate your own sovereignty or freedom because you know their laws. They're put out there. Don't speed. Don't speed, especially through like a school zone. Don't, they have certain things that you can, you may not agree with, but, you can avoid by being, a good sovereign citizen and not getting yourself in more contracts with the government or the police or your state or city, kind of a thing. So do you have anything else to add? I think people just they don't really understand that whole, ship thing in that court sometimes it's like, it's shocking when people start to discover that, that's really happening, and that the judge is the captain of a ship. So he's not like, a city or state or federal judge. He's just the captain of a ship, like a pirate.
Yeah, and they all operate on letters of marque, which basically for them is just it's one letter that they probably have on file somewhere that authorizes them to go out and do piracy acts upon the land, which they claim is the sea. And since they claimed it as the sea, the way they did that was back in 1933, I believe, where the Coast Guard has brought the seas inland, and they took plaques and put them up in front of every state building in each state. And if you shoot a line straight across, you'll see that the plaque is just above the basement, but just below the upper level, which means that everything down below the waterline, like you were saying, is basically history. You can't go down there and dive and find out the things that you want to know. However, it is open to the public, and in Arkansas, we did go down to take a look at the books. We went back into all of the Treasury books back to 1933, March 8th, and on that date, Arkansas had $7.some million in the green. Then you turn the page over and you go to March 9, and all of a sudden they're bankrupt and they're $7 million in the red. How does that happen overnight? Yeah, but everyone has the right to go in and look at those things. I recommend that people do, just to find that for themselves. Another thing that really was strange in Arkansas is we went into the general attorney's office to see if he had a license to practice law. They let us in. He wasn't there, but we got to go into his office, and on his wall he had a certificate to practice law issued by the corporation, but he didn't have a license. None of them are licensed. So from there we thought, well, let's go check one more thing out, because we'd been looking at the driver's manual for Arkansas, and about 3/4 of the way through, it had a written statement there that stated that all Arkansas citizens that wanted to go out of state for any purpose had the right to come in and get a diplomatic passport to go across the Arkansas borders. And boy, we wanted one of them. So we went into, again, the state building, right up to the head part of it where they're all attorneys. They all operate the system. There's no real people in there. And they wouldn't issue us a diplomatic passport to go outside of the state. And we said, you have to. It's right here in the law, and you're going to have to do this stuff. But if you look at when that law was written, it was prior to 1933, and, well, actually prior to 1938. And anything prior to that, those lawyers will not act upon. They don't have any authority to act upon it. That's why they didn't. We wanted to look at it in a different way, that they were just being stubborn about it and didn't want to give anybody any power. But it just goes back to the point where they can't support those things because, well, there's a lot of things they can't support, because if you go back in a lot of the Supreme Court cases, you'll find out that you have the power of a king to walk around this land. No one's supposed to be harassing you for any reason. You have the power to travel without interruption, with cops stopping you all the time, to go on witch hunts to see what you have in your vehicle that they can arrest you for, or anything else. So everything's under a different state of being, and everything that they do is, like I said, it's just all in the water. However, you can get out of the water, and there are ways to do this, and a lot of them are through the same ways that the original country was founded in the first place, and that's through a declaration, which happens to be one of the most powerful instruments in the world. Otherwise, we would have never made a Declaration of Independence. We would have used something better, obviously, but we didn't. So in these declarations that you can make, they will still be ignored if you try to use them in a court, or if you try to use them against a traffic stop, because they're just a single declaration made by you, and you haven't had any proof yet that it's yours other than corporate property. You haven't put that type of an instrument into your declaration, because see, once you do a declaration, you should be doing two things, or one of two things. And one is you put in the paper that you've made a declaration claiming your status, and you should do that for 3 Mondays in a row with a statement of publication, because that puts it on the common law record as to who you really are. And of course, the second thing you can do is you can go in and you can get an apostille stating that your document is now legal. And those two things there will give you a big head start, but I still wouldn't be using them in the field. I would not do anything against that cop that might tick them off. I would save all that information so that when the time came to put in a motion for discovery, that these things are now included, and they're going to have to answer that motion so that you can validate your separation from them. For some people, that seems like a lot of work. They don't know how to write declarations. They don't know how to do anything else. Of course, the third thing you can always do is use the third most powerful signature in the state, and that's through, what do you call them, guys? The notary public. Notary public sit right under the Secretary of State. Their signatures are powerful. And so if you were to do something like a declaration of expatriation to get it notarized, if you're going to do another way to separate yourself through perhaps a trust, then also get that notarized. And then once you got these things done, you're still, like you said, you're still going to have to play the game. You're still going to have to not argue. Just go about, follow their simple little laws. Be good, but when backed into a corner, come out with a vengeance. That's what I say. So, all you people out there who want to get away from the system, I suggest you wait. Let's find out what Mr. Trump's going to do. Let's find out how he's going to reset this system. Let's find out when we get on that new money that has been made illegal now. And from there, we should see a good pathway to our future. Again, the last thing we have to come across, the last thing we have to destroy about the old system is everything that takes place in your little communities. They will be the most difficult to overcome.
Well, one of
I
the
don't
things,
care what anybody says, they are the most difficult to overcome because that's how they make their living.
yeah, well, that's going to be, people are going to have to go back to being producers, and virtual stuff is not producing anything. It doesn't actually.
Yeah, it's a corporation that produces nothing. The only way they can stay alive is by plundering the people. And then that comes up with another thing. The other way, like I said, if they're going to sell your home, they do it in the courthouse steps, is that they will not put the name of your property into an upper and lowercase name. That will not happen. I've tried that in Missouri when I was trying to pick up just a little piece of property. I got upset when they was trying to rewrite my name. I had a birth certificate with me that showed them just exactly how my name was spelled. And the first thing they said is, why do you want to upset everything? Why do you want to do this? Just let it go. You can't just let this stuff go. Somebody's got to, start somewhere. And the other thing you do, like, for instance, if we do this in the future and somebody wants to own the property, put it in the upper lowercase name. You can put it in your city, which is upper and lowercase name with a comma, and then your upper and lowercase name of your, upper and lowercase name of your state, upper and lowercase name of your town, and no zip code. If I did anything, I'd put United States number 3 under, but you never use a zip code, never put anything in all capital letters that would assume on that document that you are part of the admiralty, that your land is just that, it's land and not water covered.
Right, because they do everything in corporation lingo, right? It's all capitalized, like on your driver's license, passport.
Yeah,
your name on your bank account, even your corporations. Well, you are a corporation because they, turned you in.
Everything they do has to be in the all capital letter name because that's their private language. They can't use our language on the land. They can't use our land. They have to operate in their territory, which is called the water over the land. They're pretty well limited themselves to their own demise with coming around.
Right. So what do you think about, so one of the things that Bill and I, we worked on for a while is we didn't really like a lot. The good thing about Bill and I, we have these really good conversations about law and presuming law. And so we have a lot of debates, and Bill has a lot of, information and tools in his pocket. So one of the things that we did in order to kind of move more towards a sovereign place is we found documents that we liked and then proceeded to shift them a little bit or upgrade them. Also, one thing that we've learned is that, you don't want to apply a lot of these documents at the last minute or after the fact that something's happened, because you can't remedy the past thing with a future thing, right? So you always want to make sure that you've kind of dealt with documents or, however you want to see yourself or as a person on the land and that route that you choose to go. But you want to make sure that these documents are done like far before you ever kind of need them. Which also gives you a little bit of a presumption. So a lot of dealing with, admiralty or common law, admiralty law has a lot to deal with what the presumption is and who gives the best argument in front of the basically captain of the ship. Whoever has the best presumption, who has the documents or whatever else, usually sometimes, can win. So you always want to have the presumption on your side, and you don't want any kind of remedies to be a last minute deal, because those can get you kind of into trouble as well. But so one of the things that we did is we really liked, and everybody can go online, I think there's somewhere, and there's something that Heather Tucci did that we really liked. However, we did change some of it, and there's parts of it that I think a lot of people don't really understand and how it needs to be filled out. But we did the factualized trust, and the UCC numbers on it are non-refutable. And people can say whatever they want about Heather, but the fact that these UCC laws are international, which actually help to free us, turn us back into the beings that we are, that these UCC laws are international and they are in the system, and that is a fact. So the factualized trust is based on 100% fact and also law, and also using their law with their UCC codes, which are, I believe, waterway maritime law codes as well. And it defines us, these UCC laws that are on the factualized trust document that Heather Tucci did, and you can try to find those and look them up and download them and, fill them out. There's little intricate things, so make sure you look at every single part of it. But one of the big things that Bill recognized early on was there's a area that on the factualized trust on the first page that's identifiers. And we realized we could use these identifiers. Identifiers are what identifies us and what accounts are identified as our corporation accounts, right? So for example, and doing the factualized trust kind of helped me to really kind of see what the identifiers were, and that they're separate. So when I was born, and I always tell people, the doctors are the biggest criminals of the land. They are the brokers of our life and death, and they broker us as human commodities to the government. And then once the birth registration, so the ship, the mother, goes into the port of entry and the port, which is a hospital, and then the dock attendant, the doctor, registers whether the contents of the berth of the ship that were removed onto the port of that country, if they were alive or dead. If they were alive, they issued a registration of commodities removed from the berth of the ship, which is the birth certificate. And then they send it, they send it in, and then the government picks it up. And then what they do is they register you in a capitalized name as a vessel, a ship, right? Because we're all ships, right? And then what they do is they register you lost at sea, and then they make themselves United States of America, copy pasted INC Inc. Then decides to be the trustee of your trust or your federal trust, right? That were pulled into and used by the Federal Reserve and the governments of the world. And then they issue amounts of money attached to you. And then from that point on, every time you get a new account, you could say, well, a new account would be a mortgage. A new account is a driver's license. A new account is a social security number. And so all these numbers identify your main trust and are offshoot branches of bonds and life insurance policies that they've taken off of you. So those are your identifiers. So the biggest criminals of all of this are the doctors. And unless a doctor resigns his licensing, he is part of it. And I don't care how good that doctor is, but he is part of being the broker of human trafficking and human commodities for sale by governments, period, end of story. So you cannot trust your doctors. But anyway, so on the identifiers for the factualized trust, you can list social security number, your number. You can list birth certificate, place where the birth certificate was created, the number in lower and upper caps. Then you also have your passport. You can do military ID, which is also an account. It's not you, it's not your ID, but it's basically bank account kind of thing that was opened in behalf of your trust by the United States government. But you can put these identifiers on there on your factualized trust so that when you need to use it, you have presumption that at this point in time, 6 years ago, I included my driver's license and driver's license number, that account that is supposed me, that these people think that they have rulership over that trust as me lost at sea, when the factualized trust actually makes you back to being the original depositor, the trustee, many different factors over your corporation entity. And those accounts include the driver's license, the identifiers of that account. And so basically what that does is it puts you kind of in a legal way, puts it back into your hands. And it uses UCC codes to do that. And then we beefed it up. So Bill did some beefing up, and we added a power of attorney document that went along with it that further clarified that me, the lower and uppercase real life man on the land, was the trustee of this trust. So that way I still can do whatever is necessary in order to make sure that any trespasses on that trust that I can attend to immediately, and I have legal authority. And, the other thing too, you always want to do, and then we're going to go to break here real quick, and then we'll be back in 4 minutes, so hold on. But the other thing too is you always want to have that red right or hand thumbprint over your signature. And that's because that is the main identifier of who you are. So anybody can say anything about that. When you were born, your footprints were taken. Everybody has their own individual prints, period, end of story. So when I put my fingerprint on that, on top of my personal signature as a man on the land, and I put my red thumbprint on top of that, that is the main identifier that says that, yes, in fact, the original person is the identifier on that document. All right, we'll be right back.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Hello, all you good-looking people out there in Revolution Radio. This is Mario. I invite you to join me Thursdays at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other. It's a show about you, it's a show about me, but ultimately it's a show where we try to have a little bit of fun. We discuss some quirky topics, and we do our best to be apolitical. So I invite you, put on your favorite pair of comfy sweats, your smoking jacket, and grab a beverage of your choice, and join me Thursday evenings at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other on Revolution Radio.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
From the astral realms to the physical plane, the halls of power to the walls of home, the multiverse to the innerverse, all will be haunted by the ghost in the machine. I am Steve Zerloff, the ghost in the machine. Mondays, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Studio B. Exclusively here on Revolution.Radio.
This is Barbara DeLong, host of Nightlight Radio, inviting you to join me on a cosmic journey, exploring a metaphysical montage of spiritual material, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between, including spiritual readings for those who seek enlightenment. Let Nightlight provide you with equal measure of light, love and laughter, insight, wisdom, and inspiration. Monday nights, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on Studio B, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
Do you or someone you know suffer from poor circulation, shortness of breath, or chest pains? Are you looking for a more natural solution to help overcome these problems? People tell us that after just a few months taking Extendivite, their doctors have noticed unexplainable improvements in their overall health. For more information, visit heartdrop.com or call 1-877-928-8822.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
And tell them Nighthawk sent you, because if you call this number and tell them Nighthawk sent you, you'll get $5 off your first order at extendivite.com. Thank you. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hey, everybody, it's the second hour of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show. Uh-oh, I hear some, there it goes. Anyway, so Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and I'm on the second hour, so the show is from 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 1 p.m., 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so that is the time of my show. Also, you can go on at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and click on the Studio A and the schedule. 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can find a bio about me and contact information if you need to do that. Also, we are listener supported, so please go to our funding page as well. Anyway, we're on the second hour with Bill. Billy Dale is his code name we're using today. And we're not going to be giving out any contact information because Bill is doing this on the sly for us. Just, you know, it's good to keep your library safe. So whenever I'm helping to do work out in the public and Bill's in the background helping, he's like my secret library. So I keep the secret library safe. All right. So Bill is one of my mentors and teachers, and he was, retired common law judge, and it just has tons of information. Some of the people that he studied under early on were unbelievably brilliant. And one of the things spiritually, I think, for me, people know that I'm not a big Jesus person. That, was raised in the Pentecostal church with my grandmother, but also we had a very shamanism type medicine family. But one of the things that I've learned is that spiritually, and being in holistic type avenues and medicine and whatever else, and strange bloodlines, we were taught early on to stay away from the cops and the courts and a lot of these things, to keep yourself safe and kind of keep yourself hidden in a way. And then there was a point in time where I couldn't hide anymore. The state decided they were going to eradicate people like me, just get rid of us. Now they murder you outright. They don't even try to fake cease and desist you. Throw you out of your office. Now they just flat out murder you. But there was a time where, all of this resistance in me in learning the law or trying to figure out what the law means or where my place in it is or who am I, even though I believed myself to be an energetic being, created by the Creator, there's still something lacking when you have inner resistance against learning about the world that you're living in, right? Without fear, without, anxiety, but to just, face the facts. So, I was going through that period. That's where I met Bill. And that's where, my turn in the road with common law or sovereignty or whatever you want to call it, came into being. And it was a tough road for me. There were a lot of things I think that disturbed me to my core and terrified me. And I had to kind of move through that in order to get to the other side, because what kind of power do I really have? if I'm terrorized and afraid, right? Just because an organization or somebody confronts you, they try to pull authority over you, no matter who they are. The only way that they really, really have authority is if you give them that authority. And by giving them, it's by, consent, which means that it's an unverbal consent, where you don't decide to at least look at what the contract and the terms are, try to figure out what that means, and then try to figure out what your placement is. And basically what I'm saying is that I became a lot more spiritually strong in my being because I know who I am now. I know not what my rights are or what my civil rights are, but I know in myself who and what I am and who I choose to be while I'm in my suit, my bodysuit, and how that's conveyed without fear or terror, and being okay with that, right? Being okay with that's part of my life. Legal paperwork now will probably be for the rest of my life, will be part of my life. But Bill, do you have anything that you want to add from the first part and then now from the second, what I just said?
Yeah, let's talk about one more thing about that capital letter name. And that all capital letter name is their private language, and it represents a legal fiction. And so when they put your home into a legal fiction name, that your home becomes an automatic business, and the tax you're getting every year is the cost of doing business because you're a corporation. Had that land been in your upper and lower case lettering, hey, well, now they can't tax you. So this is why they're forcing the all capital letter language all over the world. Kind of comes in with the beast, from the Bible and Revelations. And I've gave that a lot of thought in my times. And so I think I've already mentioned the fact that there's a plaque in front of each state capital that states the Coast Guard have brought the seas inland to this altitude, and it's a felony to deface this plaque. Well, the beast comes from the sea. It says right there in the Bible. So the beast comes in, they bring water in so the beast doesn't die. And everything from this point on is done through the all capital letter names through a fraud, which includes the Internal Revenue Service. Now, a lot of people really think that you owe a tax because you have a Social Security number or a straw man, which comes from the book, The Wizard of Oz. Because one of the first things that happened in The Wizard of Oz is that, first of all, her slippers weren't ruby red, they were silver, which is a form of money. The yellow brick road is the gold. If you want to find out what's going on in the world, you follow the money trail. So this is what she did. She got on the money trail and went for a walk, and the first thing she knew, she wasn't really allowed to go any further unless she had a straw man. What's a straw man? It's her all capital letter name. So she picked up her straw man and she went bouncing around through the forest a little more, and then what does she run into? A tin man. Well, the straw man isn't going to be any good for filing taxes unless they give you a dang number to file taxes with, which is your tax identification number or your Social Security number. So now she's all set to travel up the road of fraud. And, of course, she runs into the cowardly line, which is represented by the cowardly people who don't want to study, don't want to learn, don't want to know who they are. They don't want to know why these bad things happen to them because they're all afraid. And they said, now, to make this world even better, let's go and get these people on drugs so they don't get any smarter. So they cross this poppy field, and next thing you know, they're all stoned because it starts raining poppy cocaine and all this stuff. And, of course, their little angel comes and gets them better, gets them in the hospital, they feel better, and they move on to the source of the evil, which is the secret man who's behind the curtain. And so he sends them out, says, I can't do anything for you. You bring me the witch's broom. And he knew in order to get the witch's broom, the witch would have to be dead. The witch is the admiralty, in case you didn't know that. And so they go and they get the witch's broom. which is now burnt and won't fly, won't do anything because she's put out of service because she tried to burn her straw man up to get rid of her so she could collect all that CUSIP money that sits in the Wall Street for you. And anyway, they threw water on her. She melts away. Well, with the saying, well, I've discovered you work in the admiralty. Everything you're doing is a fraud. You can't do anything to me, so go away. And she did. So they took the broom back, and now everything's exposed, and all the big boys now are coming out behind the curtain with 70,000 indictments on them. And pretty much we can conclude that the straw man and both the tin man have been given something to keep them happy for a while, like an artificial heart and a diploma that says you have brains. So this is all where this stuff came from. This book is written by a man who married into a wealthy banker family, and he listened to how these bankers were making plans on taking over the world, taking over everybody through false information, through straw mans, all capital letter names, and doing everything, stealing all the gold, and giving them nothing in return except Federal Reserve notes, which now outlawed. So when we get to the place of the IRS, I will tell you this: the IRS is illegal. It does exist, and it exists in Puerto Rico. It does not exist in the United States. All the people that work for them are Puerto Rico employees. They're all carrying guns in our state, in our households, in our streets. So they have no right to do so. The Second Amendment does not cover them. It covers people only. Second Amendment does not cover the corporations and all the private security guards coming out in the street threatening you and shooting you. It covers none of that. So go back to the IRS. Do you have to file? No. Why? Well, the Supreme Court came out in early 1937, 38 and says, look, Congress, you're going to have to do something because you got this crap about about people having to pay taxes on their labor property. And says, you can't do that. You got to get rid of these because it's a violation of both the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, and the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. So they had no choice. So in 1939, Congress came out and stated that all internal revenue laws are hereby repealed, except for in Section B. And if you go to Section B, it states if you owed anything prior to 1939, it's still owed. So in other words, they canceled all the internal revenue laws, and everyone who's been prosecuted in the meantime have been prosecuted under a fraud. There's never been a law. All they do is walk in and they're all capital letter name and say, yeah, that's me. So they go ahead and say, well, then I got to tax you because you're an artificial fiction. Hey, you don't have to do that. If you go and study this law a little bit more, go into the 1998 Sub-Senate hearing on IRS abuse against the people. And one small section out of there, it claims that the district what do they call him? The district administrator for the Internal Revenue Service, the director, assistant director. And he stood up and he said to the senators, he said, Mr. Senator, whereas firearms are 100% taxable, income tax is 100% voluntary. So based on this information, the senator started thinking, he goes, now, whoa, back up, director. He says, if this system is voluntary, then you can't use the term tax protester anymore because you can't protest a voluntary system. You just simply don't volunteer. He says, therefore, you will never use that term again, and you will have, from this point on, filers and non-filers. Now, we got the second thing working in our favor. Okay, I've been a non-filer for 20-some years. My son's a non-filer. They've tried to get me into court like they've anybody else, and I just sent them a FOIA. And I took protection under the Paperwork Reduction Act and explained to them that there are no laws. What law are you going to prosecute me under? Oops, they don't have any laws. Uh-oh, that's too bad. Because Congress went out and did another thing. That was under the Paperwork Reduction Act. They actually came out and gave you securities under that act, which states that the Internal Revenue Service cannot come after you. Administratively, they cannot come after you with a debt collector, and they cannot take you to court. Whoops. How many people do you think are going to court every day right now that are being prosecuted against this act? There are no laws. They have an act to protect you. Read it. I suggest everybody read it. It's called the Paperwork Reduction Act. The reason they can do this act is because of that OMB number up in the right-hand corner. That OMB number states that if the word voluntary is not on the face of that 1040 or that 1040 easy form, is that there is no requirement to fill it out. Throw it in the trash. On the FOIAs I've sent to the Internal Revenue Service, I demanded a 1040, a legal 1040. They won't send me one. I've done it 3 times. They finally sent me a letter telling me not to ever communicate with them again. Gee, I wonder why. I caught them with their pants down. They couldn't do anything to me. In fact, I took 4 corporations that I'm a manager for out of the tax system. The corporations themselves do not pay taxes. If they pay taxes, they're under the same law, because those OMB numbers are on all business tax forms, which means you don't have to sign them. My son beat the IRS when they wanted money from him. He went and filled out the 1040. He just refused to sign it. Sent it to him. There's no law saying you have to sign it. Show me the law. I'll give you $1 million if you show me the law. There is no law. So what they do, they sent it back 3 months later and said, gee, we can't plunder you and let you sign this. That way we'll have permission to take everything you own. And we said, no, thank you. We tore it up, threw it in the trash. He's never heard from him since. There's no requirement to sign anything, people. So what do you think about that, Bridge?
Well, I think, I learned some of that stuff. You have to be careful about everything that you read, especially if they send it out to you. I remember when I was sent in, got a corporation soul, and I don't think that you can get corporation souls anymore. I think it's like I think you can buy older ones if you can find them and resume them, but I don't know if you can. But anyway, when we sent, so I was working with Bill and some other people, and so when I got my corporation soul, one of the other people involved, and I don't have permission to use his name, so I won't use his name. He helped me with the IRS, and so sent by fax to the IRS, to get the numbers, get a tax identification number for my my corp soul and some other business entities that I opened during that time when I was starting to become sovereign, down the sovereign road. And I remember they sent the fax back with a number or whatever and said, we'll be sending you a letter in the mail, blah, 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 blah. Nothing for me to sign there. Then I get this letter in the mail that says something about that I need to contact them, blah, 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 about, my corp soul, blah, blah, blah. And I remember this other person who's also a brilliant legal person reading it. And because of the intimidation about dealing with some of these agencies and my own insecurity, I implied it to mean something that it didn't mean. And basically what he said was, what they're saying is, if you contact them from this point on, you're basically in contract with them. So they gave you, they had to give you your, tax ID number for your business. But now if you send this letter back or you contact them about your business in the future, then they'll be able to send you stuff in the mail and you'll be in contract with them regarding your business. And then he looked at me and I said, so I don't need to sign it and send it back and I don't need to send them anything. And he looked at me and started screaming in this coffee shop. He's like, do you want to go to jail? And I was like, no, I don't want to go to jail. He goes, then don't get in contact with them. And he's like, that's basically what it said.
You do not sign it.
Yeah, don't sign anything that they send because they're going to send it to you to see if you're going to be dumb enough to get in contract. And once you do that, then they have legal ownership over you. You're basically saying, yes, I'm in, contract with you, blah, 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 blah. So you have to kind of read the fine line. Sometimes you got to get yourself. I was noticing that the Black Law dictionaries now are not like the ones that you have, Bill. What year do you need to try to find a copy of a Black Laws dictionary before they really started changing it? Do you think?
Oh, years and years ago.
Well, ones that before the 80s to get one. If you have to go buy a used one to get all the right proper stuff in it. Because this is the deal, is you have the, regular dictionaries that most everybody are taught to use. They're in the libraries when you're a kid. This dictionary is constantly being thrown on you. Now, what you would define in that dictionary, and then you define in an older Black Laws dictionary, are not even the same definitions. And this is where you've got to go. You've got to go to the Black Law dictionary to find out what the truth is about the actual definition of what you're involved in. So did they really start to change it before the 80s? I mean, if you had to go get a copy of a Black Laws dictionary and you had to go get obviously a used copy, what year would you go for? Which time frame of the Black Laws dictionary would you go to purchase?
Well, I don't go by time frames. They just have Black's Law 1 through 7. And the reason they keep making new versions of it is because they keep changing the definitions of the words. So, like the word firearm. If you go back, if you could find the original Black's Law, and then it might not even be in there, but I know for a fact that it's in the Library of Congress, the actual definition of a firearm, and that is a firearm is a starting pistol. However, if it's converted to shoot a projectile, then it becomes an arm. So you got to realize the Second Amendment protects us from arms. It doesn't mention firearms. Firearms is a whole different thing. It makes a loud noise to start races with. Some fire comes out the end of the barrel, which is why they call it a firearm, because that's all it does is provides a little bit of a fire. But if you go into the Arms Act today and look at that, they took out the definition of firearms and immediately go to the definition. Let's put it this way. They took out the definition of arms and went straight to the definition of firearms. And then in the middle of the definition of firearms, they tried to write an independent definition of arms and an independent definition of weapons. And so what they're trying to do is include everything into being a firearm, because you don't have constitutional protection over firearms. One of the first things you're going to do if these people want to keep their arms is realize what an arm is versus a firearm. And there's, talk to these military people. Tell me how many times they went to port firearms or right shoulder firearms. They don't do that in the military because they don't have any firearms. All they have is arms. So, you got a side. You can have a concealed sidearm on you, concealed. It's kind of hard to conceal a shoulder arm or anything larger. But that's what they're going by. They changed the definition so that they can operate under the term firearms versus the term arms. And if you say, yeah, I had a firearm, what you're saying is you violated one of their little bylaws, and who cares? If they ever ask me if I owned a firearm, I always say, no, I've never seen one in my life. And that's the truth. I never have. I've owned arms, shot a lot of arms. But again, the reason they have all these different versions is to change what words mean. They need to change it so they have authority over you, so they can jump right in the middle of you and put you in prison so they can start collecting your CUSIP money. Everybody has a lot of money there and they want it.
Yeah, I think there was a period, I think it was like 2010, and one of the people that we were involved with at the time, there was like a group of people who got together who Bill was trying to educate, but they really kind of weren't listening all the way. And it came to the front that if you have a vehicle and you have a vehicle registration and all that, then you're going to have insurance on your vehicle. You're going to have a license plate. You're going to have a tag yearly, and you're going to have to pay taxes, all different kinds of types of taxes. But the original term was automobile, and that if you owned your car, you could actually file for the automobile title. Like, you can't do it if you have payments on it because there's somebody else that has the ownership. But it turns out the word automobile was the original term used, and you didn't need insurance, you didn't need registration, you didn't need a license plate or a tag. You just, would need the title that was returned back to automobile. And there were a couple people in the process of doing that, taking their, vehicle registration once they owned it, or, it was out of any third party's financial authority, or whatever that means. But and that you could apply for the automobile registration, which by law, has a totally different definition. And this is the other thing too, is there's multiple types of definitions, because like Bill said, with the Black Law Dictionary, they keep putting out a new version because they have to cover some of the, ways that they're using terms, right? So they're changing the language as they go along to suit them, which is like, total fraud. And then on top of it, you're being given a dictionary, Merriam dictionary, that you're using in school. And so you don't understand the real original language and how it's used in the first place. So sometimes you're operating under, two major scams of definitions of language, the legal ones that they're using and the ones that you were raised with. And you don't even really know that there's a third one. And sometimes when you start to learn, you start looking through those older Black Law dictionaries, somebody sends you some kind of thread or document or whatever, and you start to, evaluate the words like in an original Black Law's dictionary, and you evaluate the definitions. You'll start to see like they're talking in a language that you're not familiar with. And so you have to understand what they're trying to say originally so that you can actually decide to counter it or not, and figure out, what kind of hook that they're trying to hook you into, or accusations that they're trying to make. And sometimes you don't really understand that. When I citizen lobbied in 2009, 100 hours a week, I fought against 50 bills. 47 of them didn't even move through. One was totally like kicked to the curb, didn't even make it out of committee. One of the things that I had to learn was I had to work with people there were like 8 people who'd been working since 1974 as citizen lobbyists. They were from very, very conservative religious groups, but they held as best they could any kind of rights that people could possibly have against, every 2-year legislature. They were up against 890 paid state and federal lobbyists with agendas. And I had to learn legal stuff. I had to learn law. And since they were so busy with, 1,500 bills between 8 of them for over 6 months, they had to decide whether, and go after the really, really bad ones and make sure they didn't get passed. So I ended up having to start to read the law and the bills. And so I had to get a Black Laws dictionary so that I could actually read through the languaging of the bill. And then if I thought it was bad, I'd have to go sit and I'd listen. And so these people were sending me in emails bills that they thought may not be good, and I'd have to read them. I've had to look over Black Laws dictionary because if I looked at the regular dictionary, I would have thought, wow, this sounds really good. This sounds like a really positive bill. But when I look at the Black Law Dictionary and I look at the languaging, I'd be like, oh my God, this is like the worst possible thing that could happen. This bill that would get passed. So basically, they have us under a language hypnosis. We're hypnotized. And unless you're, I think part of true consciousness is waking up to the hypnotism that's been placed on you since the early beginning. And it starts with, the regular definition and education dictionaries that are in public schools as a part of the training. And it is hypnosis because the language they are teaching you is not the real language that's being used against you. in behalf of you, because they have the trust over you. So they are using them in behalf of you against you, which is even sicker. You have anything to add?
Well, I want to talk about being born. For instance, one of my mentors, his name was Clyde, and he had a grandson that was just getting ready to be born. He didn't know it was going to be a son at that time, though. Turned out that it was. And so he was already at the hospital with his parents. He'd already talked to them. He already told them about the all capital letter name. And so what they did is they prepared their own birth certificate. They already had it printed out what his name was going to be, upper and lowercase, gave him an address in the United States, number 3, time he was born, and all that stuff. That was all there. All we had to do was just write it in. It was all ready to go with the name and everything. And so when he was born, the physician came out with his version of a title. Clyde looked at it, tore it up, and says, "No, this is his birth certificate here. Sign as him being delivered by you." And he says, "I'm not going to do that, and you can't do what you're doing. It's illegal. And I'm going to have you arrested." I said, "Well, you can give it a shot." So he went storming off. I mean, this doctor was mad, and he apparently went and made some phone calls. And then after 15 minutes, he comes back and said, "Well, I apologize. I can't force you to sign this birth certificate that I made up." And he says, "I'll go ahead and use yours." So he did. He signed it off, and they had a birth certificate of the first freeborn child in the United States, period. Since 1781 anyway.
When was that? What year was that about?
That was in 1997 when he was born.
And so, this is the thing. This is why they kidnap people's kids. They take them. Is because they're registered to the government. That child is a monster under admiralty law, a sea monster.
Yeah, and your own too, because they have the title to your body. So anyway, once the doctor signed that, he made a copy of it in one of their copy machines. He wrote copy on it, gave it to him, and said, "Here, send that in. We're going to keep the original. You want to keep your original because it belongs to you. If they get the original, they're going to monetize it, give you a CUSIP number, and sell you on Wall Street as a productive slave." So anyway, he was the first one to do that. He'd proved that they had no right for you to sign a birth certificate made from them. I don't know whether his son is still freeborn today or if he got sucked into the system or not. I can't answer that. But we did go in there, and we did get a proper birth certificate done.
Well, the thing is, though, is if he had to do any type of anything, the son, like if he wanted a job or he wanted to go to college or anything, he would have had to get a Social Security card, which is some kind of contract. So he would have had some kind of bank account with the Social Security Administration Office, which is probably, linked to the Federal Reserve, and then also is probably linked to the Vatican. So you have 3 owners and masters under a Social Security card.
Yeah.
Other than you.
I will tell you this. You don't need a Social Security number to open a bank account. You can go in there and give them any 9-digit number you want, and they'll still open it. I've been doing that for 20 years. Stocks still do it today. So I don't care if they put it in all capital letters or not, but you are who you are. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, what else do you want to talk about? Don't you have anything else on your list that you want to talk about?
Yeah. Let's go into what the government really is.
Okay.
Let's go into foreign relations and intercourse, specifically Title 22 USC. If you go into Chapter 11 of that title, it'll state right there, it says all public officials are foreign agents. Whoa. And I think Judge Anna talks about that all the time, that they are, in fact, foreign agents. If you go down and look at the other part of the International Organization Immunities Act of 1945, also in Title 22. It also says, relinquished every public officer of the United States to the United Nations. So what that means is every congressman, every senator, vice president, presidents, and they don't define which United States here, but United States number one controls United States number two. They are in contract. They're in collusion with one another, which means every state governor is an offshore merchant. And it even states that they're offshore merchants in one of their titles here. That's in Title 8 and in Title 28 and in Title 22. That in 1933, that it says here that rights and duties stated in Congress Congress was replaced with statutes and international law in the Roman circa 1933, and it states that all government agencies, including the states and local governments, act as offshore statute merchants of international law. So every time you go in that courtroom, you're not going there with anybody who's like you. They're offshore merchants. They have no country. They gave up their country. They are not U.S. citizens. They are not state nationals. They have nothing to do with the United States of America whatsoever. They're merely bodies of a corporation, because that's all the United States is a body of a corporation. They're given permission to settle any land and operate their little organization out of there. And so if you follow all of that, and then you come up here to a Supreme Court case, it says, insomuch as every government is an artificial person, notice that word person in there? Every government is an artificial a person, an abstraction, and a creature of the mind only. A government can interface only with other artificial persons. The imaginary of this having neither actual substance is foreclosed from attaining parity with the tangible. In other words, they can't maintain themselves on a equal with you as you're a person, you're a natural living being. They can, like it says, only artificial persons can get involved in any of their courts. That's why they have to take you in under the all capital letter name, because it's artificial. And it goes on. It says the legal manifestation of this is that no government, as well as any law, any agency, any aspect, any court, etc., can concern itself with nothing other than corporate artificial persons and the contracts between them. So now this was done way back in 1795. However, all the courts today refuse to look at those because they say they'll only look at any case that's from 1938 onward. However, that particular case is stare decisis, and the word stare decisis means that whoever tries a case like this again, the outcome will always be the same. If they retried this case, any other case, whatever case, if you're natural and they're artificial, the two are like oil and water; they don't mix. Period. So it even goes on here to another Supreme Court saying that the Michigan Department of State Police versus Williams in 1989, which they have to look at now because that's a public policy case, says it was found that the state upheld in the Supreme Court that the state is not a real person and cannot sign a contract, therefore cannot be a claimant as a victim. Oh, that's pretty cool, because what are they doing to traffic tickets? They're the claimant, aren't they? They're the claimant for everything and every ticket and every device that's ever gone out. And they have no authority to do so even under their law. It states right there, they are only going to observe everything after 1938. This came out after 1938, and it pretty well, there's enough power right there to put them all in prison for the rest of their lives.
So tell us what a claimant is. What's the definition of a claimant?
Yeah, a damaged party.
And so when the police are giving you a ticket, they're trying to say that they're a damaged party by your speeding.
They're a damaged party, and they're demanding money from you to fix the obligation. So, and without a legal contract, by the way. A license is not a legal contract.
No, it's a bank account. Has a bank account number on it.
Yeah, they're not legal either, because you're never going to find the signature of the artificial person. The only signature on those contracts are yours. That's not a legal contract. Okay, right, a legal contract requires a meeting of the minds. It requires both people adhering to all the ingredients of the contract, and both have to sign.
Okay, so let's talk about
contract.
Yeah, so one thing you and I haven't actually talked about, I mean, kind of briefly, but one of the bills that I fought in 2009 in the state of Nevada, there were 11 states at that time that were suing the federal government over it because it went against state civil liberties of their people. But the federal government was encroaching to Real ID, and Real ID in Nevada. And I believe the main reason at that time I was against Real ID getting passed as a bill and fought against it, we kicked it out the first time, was because it had things in it like chips, that they wanted to put the chip in the ID so they could track people. But the more thing that freaked me out was that they wanted to chip babies in hospitals when they were born, like animals, so that without parent consent. And so that was the big reason why I fought against that bill as harsh as I did. And then it turns out that if you got one of these Real IDs, a federal ID, so you could get on a plane, you could get on a train, whatever, leave the country, underneath their law. If something happened to that chip, now you have damaged a federal ID, which is a federal crime. And say the chip doesn't work, it just doesn't work. But, when a police tries to scan it and the chip doesn't work, they're going to blame you for damaging, a federal ID, which is a federal crime. And I have no idea how long they could actually hold you on that. But, Nevada, I call it the, cabal land, because it really is a really evil place on earth as far as darkness, and a lot of these cabal, or whatever you want to call them, New World Orderists, and the stuff that they try to apply here first. But Real ID goes into effect in Nevada in 2020. So if a lot of people have already adopted and signed on to it, I had to fight them. I got into a huge massacre at the DMV over it, because they were trying to just get me to sign a document that I would accept it 3 years ago. They're like, well, it's just going to come around in 2020. And I'm like, well, it gives me like 3 more years to figure out how not to be compliant to that. The thing is if you... How does that, how can they really do that even by their law? Because the thing is like, okay, your driver's license is basically a bank account with a bank account number that they have, gotten a life insurance policy for you. They've pulled a bond on you in case, you do some kind of thing, right? Because you're a monster claiming to be a born human. So they have this is what this account is supposed to be used for. So how could they make you, really legally, even by their own laws, it would be pretty damn hard for them to be able to actually pull Real ID on you or force Real ID onto you.
Yeah, that's like saying, that all capital letter name is me. It's like a final contract that states you are a corporation forever and you're going to be subject to all the corporate laws.
Which means they can pull more money on you. They can actually
pull more money. Yeah. And of course, the last thing is it's still not you.
It's still not you. It's like getting worse and worse. Like, so far out there that's not you.
Yeah. So it's crazy.
It is crazy. Yeah. So, I was just thinking, I don't know where I have any of that. Hey, do you have any of those? Do you have your FT Trust handy at all? I was thinking maybe we could read some of the listeners in the last, 13 minutes, the UCC laws that are given on there and what they say. I know that there's a definition on there as it turns us back into like an energetic being.
Well, I just pulled the first page up.
I think it's on the second page. Yeah.
Huh?
I think it's on the second page where it goes in, or the third page where it goes into the UCCs that are actual laws that were put in by Heather, and they haven't been, so they're in the system. I think it's on the third page. I should have gotten it, but I like the definition of what those UCCs stand for, and the definition of what's been applied of who and what we are.
Yeah, I've got it here. I'm kind of.
I think it's on the third. I think it's on the third page. There's it talks about the UCCs and. But anyway, I'd highly recommend people. You can get the Factualized Trust. Heather Tutucci's work. I think it was on BZ Ringer's blog at one time. I forget what the name of her blog is. But you can look it up and see if you can't, download and then, fix it up in your words. Make sure in the first page in the identifiers use, your documents and accounts, your driver's license, passport, birth certificate, military ID, Social Security, whatever else, you have. You could even, if you could figure out what your QSIP number is, you could actually put that in as well. I think you did that, right, Bill? We had some people for a while.
Yeah, that's on the cover page that we did. I was on there already.
Yeah, I think it's on the third page where it talks about the UCC laws on the Factualized Trust. But these are real UCC laws that have been put in to redefine, even in their system, what we are, as energetic beings, and freeing us basically from the confinements and restraints of their, identifications of us, which are monsters, ships, corporation, lost at sea. This is another reason why doctors don't have to treat you well. They're the brokers of the theft of your identity. And they, register your birth, the ship comes in, right? We talked about that in the first hour, to the hospital, which is the port, the dock attendant. See, before they had the AMA, there wasn't any real licensing.
That's why I wanted to bring up that one issue at the one time that we did go in with our own birth certificate and make it up.
You could never do that now. I can't even imagine. They would probably most likely they would kick you out of the hospital, and that they would, take your baby and put it in foster care if you tried to pull some stuff like that in a hospital. And, I had a friend of mine, I've talked about this before. I've known her for a really long time. I don't get to see her that much anymore, but she got married to her husband in 1983. They're my age. And then she was Filipina. Her father was a very high diplomat, so she was sent in the Philippines, and so she was sent to private schools, mostly in the U.S., Boston. And then her father got murdered, and the whole family had to, get exile in the United States so that they wouldn't be murdered. And so she was raised, and then she was super intelligent, super brilliant, well-traveled. She knew a lot. So when she got married to her husband, who was American, they decided that they were going to be sovereign and they were not going to be involved in the system. And they didn't really file any paperwork. They just stayed out of having a job, using Social Security numbers, a lot of this kind of stuff, and made their own way. And on one of the things that they did, they had 6 kids, and her husband went to EMT school, went through all of the EMT's, levels, and then basically birthed all of their babies at home in their own house. And so they never had birth certificates. as long as they were under her roof, they ate vegetarian and vegan. They never went to a doctor. They were never sick. They would go to like the chiropractor, acupuncturist, and things like that. And they had no social security card. They had no medical history. They'd never been vaccinated. And then, as soon as they were ready to leave the house, then she said, now you can make the choices that, you want to make. She homeschooled them because she was super intelligent and smart. Yeah. But she knew, that the only way to stay out of the system was to keep it all out of the system. And raise her kids, completely, off the grid. And then when they were 18 and they were adults, they could make whatever decisions and get in contract or get vaccinated and go to college or do whatever that they wanted to do. But under, her roof, she made the rules. And because she knew what the world was like and what the system was like and the whole, contracts and registrations of birth and, a lot of these other factors.
Yeah, exactly. So.
This is kind of these are really abnormal concepts for a lot of people, but if you slow down your life a little bit and you think about things and you just kind of start to kind of educate yourself and absorb, you're going to find out that these are normal things. I mean, women have been having babies for thousands and thousands of years. And then all of a sudden, when the AMA, and doctors are licensed, the big number one push that they have is drugs, surgery, which is always exploratory surgery on the doc contract you sign to have the surgery. So that means they don't have to cure you or fix you. And they can go remove something in your body that, wasn't part of your problem because they're exploring. They could mutilate you, leave stuff inside your body and whatever else that they want to do to you. But the big push in America is this, all this having babies in hospitals because, babies are huge moneymakers and the babies are the most important cargo commodity that runs all of the legal systems. It is the new money and currency and product that is pumped into the system. So, these hospitals, more women go, well, I want to have a baby naturally, or I want to have a water birth. Well, what's the hospital do? Well, oh yeah, we do water births now, right? Because they have to get those babies in there. There's so many other ways to have babies. And I know that a lot of the more traditional Mormon, I don't like to be in contract with groups, even religious groups. And so, I think sometimes by going to churches and having their philosophy or signing on or whatever you're doing or giving them money, you're in contract with them. Right. And I don't like even being in contract with religious facilities. But I know that the Mormon organizations more and more are training midwives that so more and more Mormon women are having their babies at home. They're unregistered births. They're sovereign. They're born man on the land and they stay that form. And so there are so many other options. And like I said, we've been having babies forever on our own and haven't needed so much medical care. And it's all because they need that birth registration because your baby is big money to them. Big, 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 big money. And if they need new money for, because your government has spent too much, they need more babies, right? That's why the Vatican and all these organizations push for more babies, because the more babies you have, the more money your government can make, and the more debt it can incur on the back of that baby as soon as it's born. So anyway, we got 2 minutes, Bill. Is there anything else that you want to add? Sorry, I didn't let you talk as much.
I may have, but I'd like to welcome everyone into the new world that we're going to start out in January. I don't know exactly what day they'll start it, but hopefully on the 1st. So if everything works out, we might be on our way to a whole new world where you're not going to be harassed anymore. You'll be able to do what you want, live like you want. You'll never get your home taken away from you because it's not going to be a business anymore. It's going to be a what they call that? Your abode, I think they call it. And anyway, your home. It'll be private property. They can't tax private property. They can only tax personal property. That's another switch in terms. Okay, if you got personal property, they're saying it's corporate, but if it's private, it could be on the other side of the field, like Commonwealth. So they always like to use their terms, just like we talked about.
All right. Well, we're getting ready to end, Bill. So I just want to say, go ahead.
That's all I have.
Okay. Yeah. So the other thing too is you're responsible for your new world as well, right? So don't take advantage of it. Step up to the plate and do the right thing. All right, everybody. See you next Saturday. Thank you for listening. Bye. Over and out.
Bye-bye.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Message to our favorite people in all the world, our listeners. Revolution Radio is you. Now, thanks to your continuing support, Revolution Radio will embark on its 6th year, bigger and better than ever. You, the listeners, have made Revolution Radio what it is, the #1 commercial-free, listener-supported talk radio station on the web and in the world. With 24 hours of live programming, 92 hosts on 2 astounding networks, Studio A and Studio B, delivering directly to you the most cutting-edge information available. In fact, you, the listeners, have gone on to be some of our most popular radio hosts. You, the listener, offer feedback that molds our programming to appeal to our worldwide audience. In fact, you, the listener, provide us with eyes and ears on the ground to give us the inside scoop on stories the mainstream media fears to touch, reporting about newsworthy events in your area, and you, the listener, are the lifeblood of this station. And we thank you for being such a treasured member of our Revolution Radio family. And so this holiday season, from all of us to all of you, have a happy and safe holiday season, and let's make this new year a success once again together. Thank you.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning, warning.
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener